Greetings, class. It is Monday, May the 4th. We're in our last 2 weeks of this school year. I hope you're getting all your assignments in so you can finish strong. Remember, you need to have all your assignments turned in, whether it's my class or any other class. You need to have those assignments in by May the 15th at the latest there. We have to process those grades, and then on Monday, May the 18th, we go through the process of determining who's eligible to graduate. We'll be calculating grades and everything. So don't slip up now. You're too close to the finish line. Make sure you're getting all your assignments in to all your teachers, including me, all the classes that you've got to have to graduate. Don't take any chances this close to the finish line. Now, for this week, week 6, we're going to be looking at PowerPoint slides 26 through 30 as we continue our study of the media. But your assignment for this week is a media history worksheet. That will be located on your student portal. It's a media history worksheet on your student portal. It is due Friday, May the 8th. Friday, May the 8th, media history worksheet. Remember, here are all the assignments that you should have previously turned in. There are 7 assignments that you should have turned in up until this point. And you'll have one assignment this week, and then next week you'll have your final assignment, which will be a test on Chapter 6 and Chapter 7. And then you will be done with U.S. government. So let's stay on track, get the job done. Now, as we go over to our PowerPoint today, the PowerPoint pretty much talks about normal presidencies and how they operate. But as we all know, the current presidency of Donald Trump is not normal. It works outside the norms of what has generally been established for the presidency in relation to the media. So what I'm going to be sharing with you in the PowerPoint today is the way it's traditionally been handled, and then I'll also share with you how it's currently being handled by President Donald Trump, because he does do things a little bit differently than traditionally has been done as a president in relation to the media. But remember last week we talked about that reporting political news and public affairs information is one of the core functions of media outlets, particularly those with a national focus. Remember, for media outlets, their focus is the national news, reporting political news nationally in public affairs. But always remember, their purpose is to make money. So they're making money, but their focus is on national news. Now, remember, there are over 8,000 reporters with congressional press passes in Washington that are covering political news for the American public. So as we pick up today, we talk about how the president receives the most news coverage of any political figure. Today, President Trump gets more news coverage than Nancy Pelosi does, or Mitch McConnell does, or any member of Congress, or any other head of any other department within the federal government. The president receives the most news coverage. He's at the top, and he's going to receive more coverage, and what he says and what he does is going to bring about a lot of media coverage. Now, presidents typically hold press conferences to shape public opinion and explain their actions. A press secretary often would brief the media on a regular basis instead of having regular press conferences with the president personally talking to the press. So that's the way it was traditionally handled. And initially in President Trump's presidency, it was handled that way. Trump has had probably, I want to say he's had at least 5 press secretaries in his 4 years in office there. The first 2, Sarah Huckabee and Sean, I can't remember his first name. He's the very first one that he had. His last name escapes me. But him and Sarah Huckabee, they pretty much gave regular press conferences, and the president did not do a lot of personal press conferences. And then Between Huckabee and Sean was Anthony Scaramucci, the Mooch, and he only lasted about a week, and he only gave a few press conferences. But after Huckabee, the last two, I think one, her name was Grisham, and I'm not sure of who, can't remember who the new one is. Grisham used to be the press secretary for Melania Trump, and she came over to work in Trump's office. She never held a conference, a press conference. The whole time she was there, she never held one single press conference. Sarah Huckabee, at the end of her term as press secretary, stopped having press conferences. And President Trump's new press secretary has not held any new conferences to date, but she's only been there about maybe a month and a half. So the press conference is kind of gone to the side. That was traditionally the way it was done, and the president very rarely got up and spoke and took questions from reporters. President Trump has flipped that on his head. He speaks a lot, especially now with the coronavirus. He almost has a daily briefing where he speaks to the press, sometimes for almost 2 hours. He will talk and take questions, but it's usually very hostile between him and the press. He doesn't like the questions they ask. He's called out reporters. He's called their questions nasty. His relationship with the press, he calls them fake news. If it's negative in any way, or it's challenging in any way, or if they're confronting him with something he said or something he's done, he does not like that, and he will push back on it. But he continues to have these press conferences. For a long time, he would have them as he would be going out to his helicopter to go off somewhere. The press would yell out their questions to him, and he would answer them. So President Trump does a lot of informal talk back and forth with the press, either in a press conference where he's personally there, or as he's going somewhere and he talks to the press. So he's been very open about that. Doesn't always like the press, but he's been real open to talk to the press, more open than some presidents have been. He also likes to call in to shows. He'll call into Sean Hannity's show. He'll call into Fox and Friends and talk with them and give his opinions and what he thinks. So he's very open as far as sharing what his thoughts are. Generally, whatever's on his mind is what he shares out there. Sometimes it gets him into trouble, but you always pretty much know what he's thinking because he will tell you what he's thinking. But he does have he gives a lot of press conferences, but it's an adversarial relationship with the press. Now, prior to President Trump, many reporters maintained personal relationships with the president. They received updates directly from him. Many of them would fly on Air Force One when the president would travel. They would be there. They knew the president, and he would speak with them, not in a formal press conference, but on these flights he would talk with the press and he would answer their questions. Now the majority of news about the president, or for a while the majority of news about the president is received through daily press conferences, but that's not the way it is today, and not really even through a press release. More or less, it's the president that speaks, and the press secretary very rarely talks in front of the press now than prior to President Trump and prior to his first 3 press secretaries. So that's a big change with President Trump in relation to traditionally how it's been handled. Now, many scholars do feel that the president does get a lot of attention, but most of it is negative. Negative coverage encourages cynicism in the population at large and alienates people from politics. People don't like the negative coverage, even if they don't particularly like the candidate or they don't like the person that's holding the office. People generally don't like all negative news. It's almost like the old saying goes, if you don't have something good to say, don't say anything at all. And sometimes press coverage can be all negative and nothing positive, and there is that lack of balance sometimes with the press. And I will say that with President Trump, most of it is negative. It's very rare that you get positive things from the media, from the more liberal media towards President Trump. The positive things are going to be on the side of Fox News. That's where you're going to get more positive. Breitbart News is going to be more positive towards the president. But the other media outlets, the Times, the Post, MSNBC, CNN, those are going to be more negative, and that's been generally the way it's always been. The president does get a lot of attention because he is the focus of national and world news, but a lot of it is going to be negative. So it's important then for a president to watch what he says, watch what he does, because he is going to garner that attention. So you have to be careful. And President Trump loves to tweet, and he'll tweet stuff out, and sometimes the stuff that he tweets out, he gets a backlash on it, or things he says in a press conference gets a backlash on it. And so a president has to be very careful about what he says, because there's an old saying that goes like this: if you know that people are going to take shots at you, don't give them the ammunition to shoot you with. I mean, I learned that as a pastor. There are always going to be people that are going to want to take shots at me. But you try not to give them the ammunition to do things or say things that they can speak negatively of you. And the same thing is with the president. There are always going to be people in the media that are not going to like a particular person that's in the office, and they're going to look to take shots at him. You just have to check what you're thinking, check what you're, well, not necessarily what you're thinking, but check what you're saying. You can think it, you can share it maybe in private, but you have to be very careful what you say in public, because there will always take people that will be there that will take it and twist it and turn it into something negative. So you have to be very careful when you're holding that particular office, because you're going to receive a lot of attention, and a lot of that attention is going to be negative. Now, traditionally, press conferences were an opportunity for the media to directly ask the president a question, to get an answer from the president rather than from advisors or spokesmen. But press conferences are very carefully staged events. That is not necessarily so with President Trump. His advisors probably have given him a script of what to say and how to answer certain questions. But the president is a maverick in that sense. He will stick with the script for a short time, but he will often deviate off of that script. He will just kind of freewheel it, which is what he likes to do. That's just his style. And he likes to freewheel it, and he likes to banter, and he likes to talk, and he expresses whatever's on his mind. And so even though the conference may be scripted, the president has a tendency to go off script. And you can always tell when the president is on script and off script. When he's on script, he's just focused on it. You can tell just by what he's doing that he's reading from the script and he's answering the questions according to the script. And then you can tell when he goes off, because that's generally when he draws the most attention to himself, and that's when he usually has his aides scrambling and they have to do damage control afterwards because he went off script. But generally, press conferences are very scripted events. They're staged events to get a certain message across and answer questions that they anticipate. That these are going to be the questions that are going to come to the president, and they will tell the president, this is how you need to answer these questions. They're going to come up. Now, they may not get every question that's going to be asked, because reporters can come from different angles in there. But they know the questions, based on the way the media works. They can tell the president, these are the kinds of questions that are going to get asked. This is the answer. This is your response to that. It's only when a president leaves the script and freewheels it that sometimes he can get into trouble. Not necessarily that he said anything wrong or did anything wrong. If he gets off on a tangent, there's a greater risk that he's going to say something that is going to be either misinterpreted by the press or something he said that he really didn't intend to say, but it kind of came out that way, and it'll blow up really quick. So staying on script in a press conference is very important to keep a president out of hot water or to keep the negative press down as much as possible. Remember, don't give them the ammunition to shoot you if you don't have to. Government officials provide answers that they have scripted and they have rehearsed before the conference. The number of news conferences given by a president varies dramatically depending on the administration. So, it's all scripted, or generally in the past, traditionally, it has been scripted, it was rehearsed, and it was designed in such a way to protect the president, but also to provide information to the media. Now, just a couple of examples of traditionally. Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan gave very few press conferences. Nixon's low numbers were partially due to the fact that he had bad previous experiences with the press and partially due to the scandal of Watergate. Reagan's low numbers were largely due to the fact that he preferred alternate venues for communicating with the press, including one-on-one interviews, answering questions on his way to or from the presidential helicopter, or during a photo session. Sam Donaldson, who was at one point was a White House reporter for ABC News, said the reason we yell at Reagan in the Rose Garden is that's the only place we get to see him. So they didn't get to see him in a press conference, and they didn't get to have those personal one-on-ones with him. And so generally the only time they would see him would be in the Rose Garden, and they would holler questions out to him and try and get a response back. The media encountered challenges in covering George W. Bush's administration. President Bush prided himself on the tight-lipped, no-leaks nature of his White House. Nothing got out. Everything stayed behind closed doors. No one from the administration appeared in the media without prior approval. No one talked about what went on behind closed doors. He kept a very tight-lipped ship. The administration was happy because of this, and the media were unhappy. Now, this has been the exact opposite of President Trump's White House. He has had a lot of leaks out of his White House, a lot of people in the White House anonymously telling various media sources this is what goes in or goes on in the White House and at these meetings. And this has upset the president greatly because of these leaks that come out of the White House. And he's even assigned one individual, who's a pretty young guy, a college student, that he has assigned him specifically to hunt down those who are leaking information out of the White House to find out who the leakers are. So in the Trump administration, leaks have been pretty prevalent. In the Bush administration, nothing came out. That kept the administration happy, but it kept the media unhappy because they wanted news. And that's why the reporters are always around asking questions, going to their sources. They know somebody in the White House. They're calling them up. They're trying to get information. Sometimes people in the White House will just go no comment. They won't speak about it. Some people will, only if their name is not brought into it. Anonymously is what they want to be. Now, President Obama preferred a more informal, off-the-cuff style of interaction with the press. But he had limited the number of formal press conferences. So he didn't do a lot of press conferences, but he just had a more off-the-cuff style of interaction with the press because he was a very open president and talked with the press easily. He was, whether you liked him or you didn't like him, he was very articulate and was able to express himself in such a way that and felt very comfortable when talking with the press that he could share with them in a very informal manner. Now, as we finish up this section of media coverage of Congress is different than the coverage of the president, whereas the president draws a lot of coverage, media coverage, and most of it's negative. Congress has 535 members, and it's a decentralized institution. So the power is spread out among various committees there. You've got the House Speaker, or you've got Mitch McConnell, who's in control of the Senate, but the power is spread out into various committees and various chairs. It's decentralized. Now, public awareness of what Congress is doing and how it operates is very low. Most people really don't understand how Congress operates. They don't understand the process of how a bill is introduced, and then how it has to have co-sponsors, and then how it has to be sent to a committee and discussed and voted on, and then from that committee it has to be placed on the calendar to be brought to the floor, and how the Mitch McConnell, who is the leader of the Senate, he has to give approval to that. Nothing comes to the floor without his approval, and then it has to be discussed and debated on the floor, and then voted on. And then if you've got two different bills from each house, they have to go in and they have to work on a compromise between the two bills there. There's a lot involved in passing laws and legislation in Congress, and most people don't understand how it operates. So public awareness of Congress generally tends to be very low. They just really don't know, and because there's so many members of Congress, they don't know everybody in Congress. Everybody knows who the president is, and most people may know who the Speaker of the House is and the leader of the Senate is. But when you get beyond that, not a lot of people know who holds the other positions, who are on those committees or anything like that. So that makes public awareness of Congress very low, and the interest for what Congress does is very low. Media coverage primarily will focus on the leadership, either the Speaker or the majority and the minority leaders. The chairs of committees engaged in reviewing important policies may get some attention from local stations and papers that report on local representatives, but on a national scale, once you get past the Speaker of the House and the leader of the Senate and the majority leader and the minority leaders in there, once you get past those, not a lot of people know the rest of the individuals. And the only way they really know about those individuals is if something is going on, say like the impeachment proceedings that went on earlier this year, and you had a lot of chairmen of some big committees that were doing all the gathering of facts and were going to be presenting the impeachment case. Their names got splashed up a lot, like Adam Schiff or Burr from North Carolina. Their names were out there, but beyond that, unless it's something big like that, most of those names you would never even have known if it hadn't been for such a big case for the impeachment trial. So that's about the only way they get any media coverage, maybe locally and occasionally nationally, depending on what's going on in Congress. But as a whole, beyond the top leadership in Congress, there is not a lot of media coverage of Congress. And what media coverage Congress does tend to get is negative on something. It depends on what they pass. If they pass something that's popular with the people, they're going to get popular press coverage. If they pass something that people don't like, they may get negative. But you don't see nearly as much negative coverage with Congress. There's a negative opinion towards Congress, but not necessarily negative media coverage towards Congress, because the interest in Congress is so low and the public awareness of Congress is so low. So we will stop there at slide number 30, and we will pick up at slide 31 tomorrow. So y'all have a great rest of the day, and I will speak with you on Tuesday.